was of her husband John's bonus check amount. And just 8 hours after that, her parents found the body in the basement. It was actually her father who had found her body. Even after the police had done a search of the property and found nothing, doctors who performed her autopsy ruled her death as a homicide by strangulation and a skull fracture. The autopsy also determined that her murder had to occur on Christmas Day. Over 20 years later, much of the case remains shrouded in a mystery. At first, her parents were suspects, as well as her 9-year-old brother. Of course, there was so much contamination of the crime scene that it was virtually impossible to figure out who actually killed JonBenet Ramsey. However, the house had been put up for sale over and over and over again, and I think it's back up for sale currently. But as you can imagine, it has piqued the interest of paranormal investigators. A couple of years back, there was a paranormal investigative team that did visit the location, the house where JonBenet Ramsey was murdered in Boulder, Colorado. There is a snapshot floating around, and I have seen pictures of this snapshot, and it is believed to be the spirit of JonBenet Ramsey. However, I don't know if it is in fact a valid, true photograph, because of course, I have no way of knowing that since I don't have access to the original file. But they say it is true. So until we figure out different, she appears really lightly colored in the photo, just like you would expect a ghost to look. There has also been EVP sessions where the investigators obtained the voice of a little girl, even captured her laughter. And I think those sessions can also be found on YouTube, so if anybody would want to listen to them, they do believe that is the voice of JonBenet Ramsey. I myself would actually be interested in visiting the Boulder, Colorado home to conduct some research myself. They say that they have got on different pieces of equipment several EVPs that they believe is her. So I would venture to say maybe they should be asking questions if she knew who her killer was, or because her family was suspect for such a long time, and there for a while they thought her brother Burke did it, who was only 9 years old at the time. And of course her mother now is dead, but for a long time the family was suspect. They've had missing evidence, contaminated evidence, and the evidence they do have now on the case is inconclusive because they found that it had so many mixtures on it, so obviously it wasn't processed correctly, and many people have touched it obviously that shouldn't have. And with that, folks, with that horrific tragedy, we will be right back after this short break with more Ghost Talk. You are listening to Ghost Talk Radio on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. 22 minutes past the hour. Welcome back to Ghost Talk Radio. With me is your host, Shelly Robertson. If you just tuned in, I invite you all to join me in chat at wbhm-db.com, where you can ask me any questions you may have or share any stories you may have regarding tonight's topic, which is Tales of Christmas Hauntings. If you missed the first part of the show, no worries. You can catch the show archive at your leisure on Spreaker, Google Play, iTunes, and iHeartRadio. Before the break, I was talking about a murder case of the very young, beautiful little girl, JonBenet Ramsey, and the hauntings in her Boulder, Colorado home. And now we will continue on with some of the more these are probably just more gruesome tales of Christmas hauntings. And like I said, all of these cases and stories tonight have had reports of paranormal activity. So, our next case takes us to Germantown, North Carolina. And I think we could sympathize somewhat on some of these circumstances. We know that the holidays can cause chaos and hustle and bustle. And through it all, Christmas can make us a little bit crazy. Well, that was just the case for Charles Davis Lawson, who actually was a tobacco farmer. On Christmas evening in 1929, he took a shotgun and murdered his wife, along with 6 of his 7 children. Now that's tragic enough. His 7th child, 16-year-old Arthur, he was off tending to an errand, and lucky for him, he would later return home to discover his father's dead body after the man committed suicide. To this day, no one knows the reason behind the father's psychotic episode. It has been speculated that it was a premeditated attack, given that he took the family to buy new clothes and take a family portrait shortly beforehand. So he takes the family and they go buy new clothes and they have a family photo taken, and then he murders them all and himself. That is a little bit psychotic. Now, some say that Charles' mental breakdown was due to head injuries sustained some months prior during an accident, even though autopsies revealed no abnormalities. Others think that Charles was feeling guilty over a rumored relationship with his 17-year-old daughter, Marie, where there were talks about the town that he supposedly got her pregnant. And I guess back in those days, that would be cause for suicide, I would say. I would say that would be cause for suicide today. This, even though suicide, I don't agree with suicide. This, of course, no matter the reasoning, was a horrific and tragic event on Christmas Day. Following the murders, the house became a tourist attraction, but it closed shortly thereafter. It wasn't open for very long. All of the family members were buried in a mass grave not too far from the church grounds. Many people have reported that the house is haunted and that the family can never truly find peace due to the fact that they were brutally murdered, of course, and that they were buried outside of the church grounds. And that is an interesting conclusion, that they were not buried in the church grounds. Now, something that we all are sure about is the financial burdens Christmas has on many people and many families. especially in times of poor economy, low paying jobs, or even lack of jobs altogether. While this next case comes from Grapevine, Texas, and is a tragic story of a man named Aziz and his family murders that happened on Christmas Day in 2011. Aziz and his wife were having financial trouble, supposedly. And basically, when he lost his job, the family got into financial hardships and they filed for bankruptcy. Eventually, the couple got divorced. And this most tragic story unfolds basically because Aziz's ex-wife, who was now living in an apartment with their 3 children, she had a huge Christmas Eve party with many friends and family, and of course, she did not invite Aziz over to the party. So the next day, Aziz showed up at her apartment dressed in a Santa suit. It was reported that his ex-wife, his 2 children, and 3 other family relatives were around the Christmas tree opening gifts at that moment on Christmas morning when Aziz came into the apartment, and he opened fire on all of them, killing everyone before killing himself. It was speculated that he committed the horrific crime due to the fact that he was jealous that his ex-wife was doing much better financially than he was, and of course, that she left him and she was moving on, and it was rumored she'd started to see someone else. There were even text messages sent out by some of the family members who were there Christmas morning prior to their murder, stating that Aziz showed up for Christmas trying to be Father of the Year in a Santa suit. And it was like minutes after some of those text messages went out that they were all shot and killed. It has been reported at the apartment that there have been strange noises, screams, and even gunshots have been heard in the vicinity of the murders, which is horrific. This next case, it takes us to Covina, California. On Christmas Eve in 2008, and approximately at 11:30 p.m., a man named Bruce Pardo, he arrived at the home of his ex-in-laws dressed up as Santa Claus once again. Under one arm, he held a large gift wrap package, and in the other hand, he held a 9mm semi-automatic